Are we nibbing on my Java thing? Not Java thing, PDF thing.
Yeah, if you keep it quick.
Me? Keep it quick.
Yes.
Feck off.
Oh,
I've got to now try and find it.
Is that Darian's on mains again, isn't he?
Yeah.
Well, at least he's at home.
Yes. Looks like it's on the 4G though. You've had the quality of that video coverage.
Oh dear. I showed your ballet video to my wife last night.
No, sorry.
Yeah, that killed that. I was thinking about it on my walk in this morning because, you know, as you do when you're out with the dog. And I was... Obviously, you know far more about AI systems than me. Obviously, we perceive what it has done to be an image of you in a tutu.
Yeah.
But I thought the way that it handled your dog was very good. So why didn't it do it with you? And is it something, because that was a render, is there something in that we can't perceive but it can, that it doesn't recognize it as like a true organic form and doesn't recognize the mechanics? Or am I absolutely sci-fi overthinking it?
I think you might be overthinking it. I think it's just, I did actually look at because at the prompt I said, and spins his body round, and I wonder if it took like very literally, so it just spun the body rather than spun the entire head and neck as well. But
I see.
Yeah.
I didn't realise you were doing choreography.
Yeah, well, because you start with a still image, and then you add a prompt as well to say what you want it to do. I mean, I've tried it a few times. It actually is pretty impressive how that works. I can definitely see they're saying like, and I'm probably going to stop talking a minute because I'm just about to.
My
kill the
apologies.
podcast,
Yes.
But I can definitely see that being used. Oh God, we're live, aren't we? Hello, people.
Forget you heard that.
Yes.
It's my fault. I led Barry down an alley. Sorry.
Oh, really?
Yes. Not for the
People
first time.
charge extra for that.
What model is that, Barry Collins? What are you talking about? Oh, what AI model? Oh, it's all coming up, Carl. It's all coming up.
Are you full of cold, mate?
I have got a bit of a cold going on.
Yeah.
You do sound really quite sort of sexy and gruff. No, let's just go with gruff.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said about me.
My youngest has been off school all week with something horrific. It's really sort of high temperatures and tonsillitis-y sort of things, and apparently the schools around here are absolutely full of it.
Ian Clark says, surprised to see Barry here today with the new Civ out on Tuesday. I've had it since last Thursday, so it's I've had a week to get used to it. But it is very good, and I will be getting back to it as soon as I've got the work done. It's getting a lot of crap reviews though, which I don't really understand from players. Most of the press seem to think it's really good, but it's getting an absolute hiding on Steam at the moment.
Is it better, or is it they've made it more complicated? Because I sort of fell out of love with Civ, where it's like the Football Manager games. I really used to like though I'm not a football fan, I used to like Football Manager games, but then they just got so stupidly complicated that it took the fun out.
Yeah, with Civ, it's gone the other way. I think that they seem to have like focused on console first, so a lot of the information in the UI that was in Civ 6 has just been taken out, and that's really annoyed the PC crowd on Steam, I think. But
Right.
I'm okay with it. I think it's. I mean, there are issues, but it's not too bad.
Is Darian humming?
He is humming. He'll turn that off in a sec
Okay.
once he returns.
How much is Civ these days?
Wow. So I bought the pre-order version, which was 70, 80 quid. So I think it's 60s for the standard version.
Darian,
yeah.
you've got to hum. Thank you.
But when you think about that, Lee, I know you're laughing, but I will probably get 100, 200 hours out of that. When you compare that to like a football ticket, which is about the same price, it's not outrageous.
Man, I would love to see you use that argument with my wife. Darling, I'm going to spend £80 because I'll get 200 hours out of that, and it's better than going to the football. Mate, your suitcases will be out the window. Is this after the £2,000 iPad, Barry? Yes, it is, dear.
5 seconds.
The answer there is don't say how much it costs.
1 o'clock, everyone. Hello.
I might just
long
wait
as you-
until Lee stops laughing in the background. It's probably not the,
Sorry.
Come on, composure, professionalism, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to the PC Pro podcast. It is Thursday the 13th of February. I'm Barry Collins and I've got a slight cold, so according to John I sound very sexy this afternoon, so there's a little bonus for all the listeners out there. And so I obviously have with me Mr. John Honeyball.
Afternoon, and no you don't.
You said it, it's on record, I'm pretty
I
sure.
was just being nice, all right?
See, if you get the red button content by turning into the YouTube feed live, you'll have that recorded and we'll go back and clip it. Lee Grant's with me.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Darren Graham-Smith.
Good afternoon.
This is Sexy Barry, says Michael Deere, with a question mark on the end. Yes, this is as sexy as it gets. And talking of sexy topics, we are starting with you, Darren.
No, we're not. We're starting with
No,
John.
we're not. We're starting
We're
with
starting
me.
with you, John. Sorry. Wow. There we go. What a start. Sorry,
It's this
John.
head cold, isn't it, mate? We'll
It
blame
is.
it on that, yeah. Yes, Apple and the UK government. This is one of those stories that appears to be quite correct because a lot of people have been talking about it who claim to be in the know, but neither side will officially confirm it. Apple can't because under the law they're not allowed to, and the Home Office under the Investigatory Powers Act says that they won't comment on this stuff. But basically what appears to be happening is that the UK government has demanded from Apple that all encrypted data that Apple holds on behalf of customers, so all of the stuff that you are holding in Apple's cloud, your files, your photos, your whatever, should be available for the Home Office to be able to trundle its way through and have a good poke around. Now, this facility to encrypt this cloud data is actually not turned on by default. You have to go into your phone settings or iPad settings and to enable something called advanced data protection. Now, the reason why Apple doesn't enable this by default is quite simple, which is that when they do that, it's then impossible for Apple to recover anything from the account. Passwords, logins, recovery of the account, recovery of any data. And so they do make it very clear to you, if you want to turn on advanced data protection, then on your head be it, and you have to make sure you have got appropriate backups of passwords, recovery keys, etc. Otherwise, it's on your head if you lose everything. If this is enabled, though, Apple at that point cannot get into anything that it's holding on your behalf. And the Home Office says that's not acceptable. It needs access to everything under the Investigatory Powers Act. Apple is basically saying no, and appears to be of the position, though again no one's really commenting, but appears to be of the position that if this is demanded for people in the UK, they will simply disable advanced data protection facility for people in the UK, rather than provide a backdoor into the encrypted storage, because Apple is saying, and I think quite rightly, that they're not prepared to put backdoors into encrypted systems because at some point the wrong people get access to the back door. This is a discussion we've had many times before. So they'll just simply disable the functionality. The real storm appears to be brewing here, which is that not only are they demanding access to UK people, customers of Apple, but basically worldwide. And they're saying that the legislation allows them to have that access from any company that actually operates in the UK. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. And it's going to be one of those sort of indication things that if suddenly Apple disables ADP in the UK, you know what's happened.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this is a complicated issue that's been dragging out for years, hasn't it? But I completely agree on the sense that if Apple's position that they've either got to turn this thing off full stop or not. You can't provide backdoors into encrypted services. What's your thoughts, Darian?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit weird because this is under the Investigatory Powers Act, which we talked about at length because it was passed in 2016. Is that right? 2019, sorry. But it was, no, wait a second. No, I was right the first time. It's 9 years since this came to pass. I remember we were complaining about Home Secretary Theresa May, I think, at the time it was originally being bandied about. So it's kind of surprising to me, really, that it hasn't come to a head much sooner. And it does make me wonder what's happened, what's changed to make. So the Home Office, as a matter of policy, will not comment, will not reveal anything about what it's actually said to whom, but we may infer from the response and from I think it was made public that there was a request of some nature, that this has been a recent development, and it just all seems very odd because the who was it, GCHQ and so forth, they've obviously understood thus far what a can of worms it would be. They didn't go wading in as soon as the act was passed to say, right, Google, Microsoft, everyone, hand over the keys. So it's very curious, and it's kind of frustrating that it's impossible to really know what to make of why it's happened now.
Lee?
I obviously we've been through this a few times in various permutations. So this got me thinking: is this just an exercise in sort of political sort of blame shifting? The government can claim that they asked, and Apple in this case, to help them, and they said no. And then I was thinking, well, how do you get around this issue? And of course, you could say that Apple is sort of sticking close to its guns, and it has refused requests from US governments to do certain things. And then you think what it's done in China, and where obviously China leverages a little more power in terms of sales, but this system doesn't work in China as far as I can work out and remember. A lot of the Apple data is stored on servers in China, and also the security keys are over there as well. So should Chinese authorities, through legal channels, need access to various bits of encrypted data, they can get it theoretically. So Apple have bowed down once before, and as some would say that's possibly how you deal with a big tech company and say, right, if you want to operate in our country, you do it this way. But yeah, it's just annoying that no one's saying anything. As John said, it's all a bit hearsay and rumour at the moment, and very sort of quite underlined ones, but we're lacking a bit of detail.
The problem with all this is that it of course becomes whack-a-mole, in that if Apple decides to turn itself as a result of this, whoever wants to hide files and encrypted services is not short of alternatives to find. So they'll just move along to the next app, and then you're never going to get to the point where you can stop people sharing encrypted data, at least not for the foreseeable future. So I don't really see what the goal is here.
I know what you mean about kind of, they'll just move on to the next one. But actually, I believe it's been kind of observed that an awful lot of people committing crime and fraud and so on are not very bright. Some of them are masterminds, geniuses who can hide through special apps and tunnels and VPNs and dark web, onion routers and so on. But many of them are actually, I think, going to be a really overtly obvious, and I think this would actually sweep up a lot of kind of low-level chancers and not very educated fraudsters and so on. So although I generally, I think I'm on the same side as everybody else, saying encryption is not something you can pick and choose. I don't share your skepticism about it being a potentially valuable, just from the perspective of crime prevention.
Sorry, John, just before, but the counter argument to that is that by highlighting the fact that this is a problem for the government and Apple, that they brought it to attention. If, as John said, this service isn't turned on by default and people were sharing this stuff via Apple Cloud anyway, it wouldn't have been a problem. The government could get to that data, but by making it an issue and putting it back in the media, a few more people might be suddenly thinking, "Oh, blimey, I didn't know that." Sorry, John.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, of course, someone, by talking about this and pointing out that most people don't have this enabled, but nasty people will probably go and turn it on, which was kind of not the point, really. You said, Darren, that this is some years ago that the legislation came in. Quite rightly, that's the case. So the question is, what's changed? And the one obvious thing that's changed, without making any political comment at all, is that we've had a change of government. And is the relationship between the current incumbents, the new incumbents, The same with the security services in America and so forth as was before. We've had all sorts of reports of various new ministerial positions having to eat significant humble pie over what they said about the great American president in the past, including our new ambassador to Washington. So maybe things are not quite as cosy as they might have been in the past, and this is an opportunity for the UK government to get a land grab in because this is something they feel they need to do. I don't know, but it's going to be very interesting to see how this one plays out.
The high poly are not short of opinions on this one. Joining us on PC Pro pcpro.link/discord. Retro Owl says if the Home Office needs access to your photos, etc., they need a warrant to access your property to seal them. If you have your photos in the cloud and the Home Office have access to these, they can access them without your knowledge. Cloud should be an extension of your property. And Ian Knock, I think, is making a similar sort of point to what John just made about the only thing that has changed is that the UK may no longer have a good relationship with the US government intelligence agencies via Echelon, and so cannot obtain it via them anymore, therefore want their own access. Two good points. Anything else to say on this one before we scuttle along, gentlemen?
I was just saying, I'm not certain it's correct to say that the Home Office can just wade into cloud storage held by a third party. I think they did need some kind of warrant, didn't they? But I'm afraid, like I say, this is law. It's so long since we were discussing and debating this, I've forgotten the specifics of the Investigatory Powers Act.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly used to. Apple and other companies used to have a sort of annual disclosure of how many of these warrant applications were made and how many were refused. From memory, and it's a while since I've looked at this, the majority were accepted, as you would suspect. So you're right, it's not unfettered access. The Home Office can't just sit there and go and find Barry Collins' images.
A court has to approve the access.
Yeah. Anyway, let's shuffle along. And there's, some interesting news on the CPU front, Darren.
Yes, this is a bit more down to kind of brass tacks. Passmark, the benchmark company, they've been publishing, how long have they been going? Like decades. And they've been publishing a regular roundup of the average and the fastest and the slowest benchmarks that have been run using their software since they began. And so they've reported something interesting, that in the past 12 months, the average speed of the average computer has actually gone down. This is the first time they've been, 21 years, sorry, is how long they've been doing it. And this is the first time we've seen a year-on-year decline in average processor power. Laptops have gone down in performance by 3.4% year-on-year. Desktops are down 0.5% year-on-year. So it's not a huge plummet. It's not that performance has fallen off a cliff, but nevertheless, it's very much... It's a reversal of a trend which I think has been more or less a straight line upwards since Babbage's analytical engine. So it's a little bit surprising, and it also happens against the backdrop of people have Intel, AMD, Qualcomm have been releasing more powerful processors in that time, at least more powerful desktop and laptop processors. So it kind of tells a story that people are simply not choosing to spend and get the fastest, best CPU they can. I'm sure Lee will have some insights on this in a moment, but I think, although this is a bit of a surprise, I think it might be good news in the sense that we've finally got to a place where you don't need to have the very fastest, most expensive processor to have a good time, and everybody is recognizing that, or at least many more people are happy with a mid-price, mid-range CPU, and they may be investing more on the memory, on the graphics, on thinking about getting something with an NPU for on-device AI. Well, that's maybe a bit optimistic, but but yeah, I think it's a good sign if people aren't going into the shop and saying, I've got to get the very, very fastest CPU because I'm worried about what it means if I don't.
If they ever did. But Lee, what is your glorious insight into this?
My glorious insight. I think just broadly, I think it'll be interesting to see what this does at the end of the year once we've gone through the Windows 10 to Windows 11 refresh, and just see how that skews things. But I can't speak about enterprise level purchasing, but at consumer level, it's always been the low to mid range which I've sold very easily, and the high performance kit has always been a problem. Consumers do like the lower spec hardware, particularly today's lower spec hardware, as we've intimated. It is good enough, as we were talking about routers last week. And I love reading the PC Pro reviews about the latest and greatest laptops, because frankly, it's the nearest I'll ever get to see them, because most of the real world, they're not appealing, and they don't sell. And so I was thinking about my customers and the trends that I've seen sort of over the last sort of 5 years. And what we have noticed is a lot of your senior users have ditched computing completely and are now purely tablets or phones. They've gone. So the computing world has lost them. Young people tend to now buy laptops because they don't have room for desktops. Desktops are a bit of a social luxury. If you've got room to have a desktop with a monitor and a standalone case, that's a bit of a social luxury that a lot of young people don't have when they're sort of flat sharing or things like that. So they've gone to that. So those high power desktop machines are really not as popular as they were. And your enthusiasts, the guys that people, your PC Pro readers that used to buy the latest and greatest, but evidently over the years and people I've spoken to, they haven't seen much difference in performance for the new generation of processor that comes in, and the cache and all the stuff like that. And frankly, most of them just can't be bothered anymore. They've spent a fortune on machines. Gone are the days where you need a $2,000 machine to be able to edit a 30-second holiday bit of footage. They can cope with an i5 and 8 gig of RAM.
Isn't it also the fact that clock speeds haven't really ticked up significantly in the past few years? What we're seeing now more cores being added to processors rather than the frequency being dialed up so much. So maybe it's just a reflection of the market over time rather than any great hunger for new processing power.
The stacking on of extra cores is acknowledged actually by Passmark. They do say that because their benchmarks do take into account multi-core performance, we actually haven't seen any improvement at the top end of the benchmark tree of their measurements in the past 2 years, because AMD brought out a pair of Ryzen desktop and laptop CPUs in 2023 which had 128 cores or something, which are not used by 99.999% of real people, but they grabbed the top spots, and nobody's put out anything with that many cores since. So those are still at the top of the tree.
And let's not forget that, for those of us with long memories, I think I said probably back around 2005, so let's call that 20 years ago in PC Pro, that at that point the hardware had clearly outstripped the ability of the software to use its full capabilities. I mean, I know it's a very arm-wavy thing to say, because there's always exceptions, gaming being one and so forth, but we've had the rise of GPUs to help with that space. But in terms of just your core CPU, core floating point, RAM, disk, networking, etc., we haven't really gone very far in terms of need for more in quite a long time. So I'm really not surprised. I mean, if you just look at something like Apple's M processor, just as an example of a leading edge processor. It also applied to AMD and Intel, but where they've really been putting the work in is in a couple of areas. One is additional new functional areas like GPU, NPU, logic engines, hardware video encode, decode in the case of Apple, for example. And the other area is in terms of lowering the power consumption by using high performance cores, but also high efficiency cores as well. So no, I'm not really surprised at all. And the best thing you can always do with any computer is add RAM, and then add some more RAM, and then a bit more, and faster disks, and then ask yourself, should you be moving beyond 1 gigabit Ethernet and so forth? But it's not actually really core CPU these days.
Yeah, John makes a point there. Some of the high-end users that I see, or the most of the high-end users that I see, are naturally gamers, and we know the power of GPUs these days. And if you shove 500 quid onto the table in front of to a gamer and say, right, what you're spending that money on, it's not the processor. They're always going to buy the bigger GPU. Now, whether that is the correct decision, about 6 months ago, I saw this bonkers machine with a 4090 in it on an i3, and I was versing the customer in the term bottleneck. So, you see these strange things. So, yeah, CPU is not king anymore, I guess.
Yeah, if it has been for a while. I think that also Potster made the point earlier in the Discord chat, and I think it's sort of similar to what you made a moment ago, Johnny, is that they've been really focusing on power efficiency, especially in the laptops over the past couple of years. So
Yeah, because 20 hours battery life is now a requirement. It's expected.
Right. And that's much more valuable than a bump in speed, because the bump in speed is going to make no tangible difference to most people's day-to-day work.
And in the Windows world, that's exactly where the Windows on ARM has made great strides and really pushed Intel and AMD into an uncomfortable corner, which they're doing their best to crawl out of. But is it enough? Is it fast enough?
Yeah.
I mean, are they coming out the corner quickly enough? Not is the chip fast enough?
Okay, well, look forward to our next high-end PC labs in PC Pro. I'm sure Tim's already preparing one. In the meantime, we're moving on, and we can't do a week without touching on AI, of course. And yesterday, Adobe announced a big new addition to its AI packages, which is generative video. So we saw, if you're in the US at least, last year, OpenAI released its Sora video model, where you could generate short video clips from text prompts, and Adobe's got itself into that game too. But Adobe's got some additional features that go beyond just the text prompts. So from a straight text prompt, you can get 5 seconds of full HD video, I think at 30 frames per second, and that's all lovely. But there's obviously a limit to what you can do with that. So Adobe, I think, has been quite clever in the way it's embedded this into its applications, most notably Premiere Pro. So they've got a new feature called Generative Extend in Premiere Pro, where if you've got a video clip in your timeline, but it falls a couple of seconds short of what you need, you can now use the AI to extend the length of that clip. And according to the Adobe spokespeople, this is quite a common problem in the film industry, where you might end up with a couple of seconds less footage than you needed. What can you do? You can only loop it or go out and re-record, and that creates extra expense. So if you can extend your sweeping panorama shot for another couple of seconds with a bit of AI magic, this could save you a lot of money. The other nice tool you've got now is the ability to create to give the AI a still image and then create a video from that. So you supply the still image. So yesterday I tested this with a picture of my dog, for example, and I said, give me a video of the dog yawning and sitting up, and 90 seconds later up pops this 5-second video that starts with my dog, and it rears up and yawns in front of you, and it looks absolutely identical to my dog. I mean, you can, if you look very closely, you start to see little bits of glyphs around the dog's mouth. But I think if that was just especially on a mobile phone, or mashed into a sort of longer video, I think you'd do well to notice that was AI generated. And some of my other experiments were a bit less successful. If you're following me on Blue Sky, you may have seen I had an AI image generated of me as a ballerina last year, and I asked it to twirl my body around, and it did indeed twirl my body around, but it left my head where it was, so it looked like I was some kind of vampirish freak who can twist his neck 360 degrees without moving his head. So there's a little bit of work to do on the realism for Adobe's AI. Other features they launched as well yesterday include the ability to translate videos into up to 20 different languages. So if, for example, someone took the video of this podcast and then tried to translate what I'm saying now, they could do so using Adobe's AI, and that apparently gets translated into a sort of natural sounding voice. We'll have to test that, obviously, before we can back that up.
Does it fiddle with the mouth movement as well? Because that would be really clever.
I don't know. That's a very good point. I'm not sure. I'll have to check that out. The other thing you can do that's, again, more for the film industry than anything else, is to either take a sketch, so if you've storyboarded a scene, or a 3D model. So often filmmakers will create little 3D models of a scene they plan to shoot, especially if it's going to involve massive special effects, and they can take that model and then you again write a prompt and you can get AI to sort of generate that scene based on the sort of 3D models that you've created. So there's lots of interesting features there. That, again, it was only released yesterday, so we've not really had time to test in anger yet. But this does come at extra cost. Even if you're an Adobe Creative Cloud subscriber on 50 quid a month or whatever, it's $9.99 for the most basic package, which will get you about 20 of those short video clips every month. If you want 70 of those, that will cost you $29.99 a month extra. And they are going to work on extra packages for businesses. So if you're in the filmmaking business and you're going to make heavy use of this, they will offer bespoke packages for enterprise customers at some point. Gentlemen, what are your views on this AI video magic? Darian?
Yeah, I'm quite, well, excited is too strong a word, but I'm very pleased we seem to have got to a point now beyond using AI as a kind of exciting sideshow, and we're finding really good practical uses for it. I mean, that thing you mentioned about being able to extend a video scene by a couple of seconds. I don't do a lot of video editing. I do a tiny amount, but even I can see that is fantastic. That is going to save people so much stress and annoyance and fiddly workarounds. I can see that's going to pay for itself in terms of someone's workflow and their time in one day. And it's seeping its way into the whole Creative Cloud. I was just the other day marveling at, if you've ever laid out any pages in InDesign, the fact there's now a generative fill option for pics. So if someone sends you a picture which is not quite the right shape for your page and you really really wish it were just wider, you can click a button and it will become wider. It will generate extra content around the sides. Similar stuff like that in Photoshop. I know I haven't yet read, I think is it in the next issue, Barry, your guide to AI in Microsoft Office and other things where it can be it can improve your productivity. But I'm starting to get on board the hype train because, well, perhaps perhaps counterintuitively, because it's no longer just hype.
John?
Well, all of these uses are absolutely fabulous. There's no question, and your dog video is great. I'm not an expert in that breed of dog, so I can't really say whether it's anatomically correct or whatever, but it certainly looked extraordinarily realistic. And all of the use cases you've given about extending a video because you didn't quite get the shot you wanted, and all of these features like let's remove something from the image and intelligently fill the background, all of these things are great from a creative point of view. My worry, of course, is that there's an awful lot of stuff that's created which is much more mundane and humdrum, and just thinking here about security camera footage and stuff like this, and what you're going to be able to do taking some footage and changing the person's head on the image who came round to burgle you or whatever. And that might sound a little bit fanciful, but there are a lot of things that are very serious in our lives that do rely upon images and footage and video footage, and rely upon the credulity of good and honest people in juries and judges and so forth to believe what they see and what they're presented with, and I can't help worrying that this has a really potentially big downside to it, for people who are absolutely clearly nefarious ne'er-do-goods and so forth. But we've had a whole spate of insurance fraud, car crashes and so forth, and the only way to kind of protect yourself from that is to have a dash cam now to try and provide your own footage that of what they did. So I don't know. I'm just do have a wary side to this.
Yeah, and I think that's where the Adobe initiative might actually come into play. So Adobe are part of this content creators group that are going to start marking and watermarking videos that are generated by AI, both in metadata and in a physical watermark in the top right corner. I think that needs to happen as soon as possible, but you're never going to be able to stop people moving that. I don't think even Adobe are claiming that it's completely foolproof. So that is certainly a worry. Lee?
Yeah, I don't really have any sort of great insight to add to what you guys have said, but I have to say I sort of tend to, my brain goes with John on this one. You know, you think you just take one frame now and you can create a 5-second video of, frankly, whatever. I think the opportunities for, you know, particularly kids and bullying and stuff like that, you know, all right, they're always going to find a way to do things, but it is just becoming so much easier to do these sort of things, and to just try and spot that this is AI generated. You know, I'm not suggesting they put a warning flag in the top corner and stuff like that. I'm just saying that, you know, to put an advert on TV, they have to put a P in the box these days for people to realise things. So I don't know. I mean, technically, you know, that video of your dog looks fantastic. The video of you dancing was predictably horrific. And it really was like Barry the Exorcist. However, just to lighten the mood slightly, about extending clips. You may know I used to work in television, and I used to know one of the editors, and it was a very famous chat show that used to be filmed at Yorkshire Television. And at the end of the show, the two guests who were sitting face to face with a little table in between, they used to lean forward and shake hands, and that was the point where it sort of faded to black and the titles run. And there was one episode where it didn't, because the guest leaned forward to shake hands and was absolutely paralytic and just fell on the floor, and there was nothing they could do. And I was in the edit room and they were having to decide where to put the cut point. I won't tell you who it was, but yeah, so they could have really got them out of that situation.
I think we could have a reasonably good guess at who that was.
Oh yeah.
Before we leave AI, it'd be remiss of us not to at least acknowledge the kerfuffle that went on between OpenAI and Elon Musk earlier this week. Musk and a consortium of investors offered to buy OpenAI for the thick end of $100 million, or billion, sorry, $97.4 billion they put on the table, and OpenAI politely declined their offer, and then I think Altman rather cheekily then offered to buy X for $9.74 billion, which many commentators said would still be overpriced, even though Musk bought it for 40. And then that prompted a little bit of to and fro between the two tech bros, and Musk had a little snipe at Altman, calling him a swindler on X, of course. And Altman, in an interview, I think with CNN, was asked what his thoughts on Musk were, and he says probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity. I feel for the guy. I don't think he's like a happy person. I do feel for him. So it seems there's not the sort of breach between Musk and Altman doesn't appear to be healing anytime soon. But the prospect of Musk acquiring OpenAI, anyone got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, given that X is building Grok and has this enormous data center they're building with vast quantities of NVIDIA GPUs, you can't help feeling that this will put an awful lot of AI-ness in the hands of one, I was going to say lunatic, but that would be the wrong term entirely, so I'll just roll that back and say, you know, a very clever chap. And I'm not quite sure that it should be in the hands of that.
I do agree, but I mean, he's already got so many companies and chairships and so on going on. I do wonder how hands-on he'd actually be. I mean, obviously, I don't want him with his hand on the tiller, so to speak, but it's not like he would be, or maybe I'm being naive, maybe he would be showing up in the office and standing over people's shoulders and saying, no, use a switch instead of an if statement there, because he can be. He is somehow, I'm not suggesting he's propelled by any particular chemical, but he does seem to have boundless energy for getting involved in things.
But this is just Musk playing mischief, isn't it? Because Musk keeps banging on about OpenAI's departure from 100% non-profit idealism. You know, forget the fact that in 2018 he wanted to basically attach OpenAI to Tesla in order to take on Google. But when OpenAI announced plans to move to a full-blown for-profit governance structure, basically to get more investment in, and they're doing this by a mechanism called public benefit corporation. But to do this, they have to sell their non-profit assets to themselves to turn it into a for-profit entity. And Musk's bid gives these non-profit assets a value which has to be taken as a proper valuation. And because Musk has offered 97.4 billion, irrespective as to whether he was going to open his post office savings book at all, means that it's now very difficult for OpenAI to shift these assets for a lower value. So essentially, like I say, he's making mischief. But at this level of high finance, absolutely nothing makes sense to me at all. Because I also read about OpenAI. Apparently, it's currently valued about 157 billion on its latest funding round. And they've just done a deal with SoftBank about getting 40 billion extra in, which apparently now turns them into 300 billion. And I don't know how borrowing 40 billion on top of 157 billion turns into 300. But it's all just nonsense. But I don't think he had any intention at all of actually buying. I think he's just it's just another dig at Altman.
Okay, well, maybe we should leave this pile of rubbish alone for this week and move on to another pile of rubbish, Lee.
Oh, yeah, no, I see what you did there. So way back in 2013, IT engineer James Howells, he made the headline when he realised that a tidy-up at home had seen him dispose of a hard drive, which he claimed contained 8,000 bitcoins. Now, apparently he got these in about 2009 for, and I quote, absolutely nothing. In 2013, the BBC reported that they were worth 4.6 million. Today, apparently, they are worth 620 million. Now, this story will sound very familiar to our UK listeners, as it made the headlines at the time, and we've discussed it on here. And since then, Mr. Howells has made many attempts to get access to this hard drive, which it is believed to be buried somewhere in Docksway landfill site in Newport, South Wales. Now, since he realised his error, he's tried many different things to get hold of this drive. The problem, as I'm sure you've possibly guessed, is that Docksway holds about 1.4 million tonnes of waste. And part of it's already been capped, which means it's basically been put out of use. Now, Mr. Howells took Newport County Council to court because he wanted either 495 million in compensation or permission to access the landfill site. And as I say, the judge chucked that out last month. So this week, Mr. Howells declared that he wants to buy Docksway landfill site. That's the lead story, which, like his hard drive, I buried. Newport are planning to close this tip in 25-26, so the clock is ticking for Mr. Howells. Now, adding to the plot, for when this, I guess, inevitably gets turned into a movie, Mr. Howells' well-documented plan is how he intends to find this drive should he get access to the landfill site. Now, he's talking about having robot dogs, like those Boston Dynamics things that absolutely have, you know, rocket attachments somewhere in a cupboard. He's going to employ them as security, and he's going to use AI-powered mechanical arms to soft through the cruff and, you know, to find this drive. And he told ITV that he'd assembled a full consortium of experts to help pinpoint the hard drive's exact location, including recovery experts from NASA even, who'd worked on the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. The problem is, and this relates to a lot of waste disposal, and it's the crux of Newport's defence, is that once you dispose of something in a recycling centre, it becomes property of the facility or the local authority. So strictly speaking, he doesn't own this drive anymore. So really, no one's really got any impetus to help him.
Yeah, I almost completely ignored this story this week because every time this guy seems to open his mouth, he's a bit like a certain president. Every time he opens his mouth and says something ridiculous, he gets reported on the BBC. But Darian, any thoughts on this?
Well, I also have largely ignored it. But I mean, the thing is, the project he's proposing seems like it's enormously expensive. Not just that whatever it would cost to buy the tip itself, which I'm sure they're not going to let it go for a song, but also these experts he's got, the amount of stuff to be sorted through, the robot dogs. I assume he's not independently wealthy enough to fund that himself. So would you lend him the money on the expectation that he will manage to find the... I mean, I do kind of think if I were the council, I might be tempted to say, all right, matey, if you reckon you can find, £100 million, or whatever it's going to cost to actually do this, then we will sell it to you for, and I think this has been suggested already, half the proceeds or whatever, half the expected return of whatever is on that drive, because... if he can get the funding and if he really believes it's worth it, then there's a lot of capital to be unlocked here.
Assuming that a drive discarded in 2009 is still in the usable state that is, and we're talking about hard disks, not SSDs, of course.
Well, it's possible.
Well, that's probably
I mean, the outside is going to be really quite unpleasant at this point, and the external connectors and so forth are probably rusted or covered in 15-year-old spaghetti or something. But it's quite possible, but that the drive itself, is provided it hasn't really been sat in water or whatever and gone through the vent hole. It's possible, but that the vents are actually that the platters are actually okay, and you could certainly take it along to those awfully good chaps at Kroll on track and get them to take it apart and have a go, and I think they would probably love to do it for the publicity. I think the likelihood of getting anything off of it is probably pretty minimal at this point.
I remember Kroll on Track used to do an annual press thing where they used to invite you along. They used to send you a hard disk about a week before, say, do your worst of it, and then bring it along, and we'll recover some data from it next week. And I can't remember who it was, I wish I could. The journalist who did it dropped it from the 6th floor of their office complex. They soaked it in Coke for a week and smashed it with a hammer. Turned up brilliantly confident they were going to get absolutely nothing off it, and I think they recovered most of the files. It was pretty impressive.
I've been to their facilities on a couple of occasions, and what they can do there is nothing short of terrifying, really. And they are. I mean, there are other companies out there, I'm sure, but the one that I know of, which is very famous, is Kroll. And what they can do is just amazing. They are total wizards at this. However, there is a point at which it all gets a bit scary.
The irony is that hard disk you were saying that was thrown off a building and soaked in stuff. I mean, they would probably have been unable to recover the data if he had just overwritten it once. Yeah. Because I mean, it's magnetism. I mean, all of those things are not going to. I mean, if you can physically shatter the platter, then then things get difficult. But otherwise, the magnetic material, the magnetic fields, domains, are not really affected by Coca-Cola or by or by a jolt to the outer case. So I wouldn't be surprised if you could get a reasonable amount of data off a disk that's just been buried under a load of nappies or whatever for a couple of years.
But the problem is it's not buried under the nappies, because this is a landfill site. This thing is constantly being mashed by bulldozers and compressors and compactors. And also, how many drives are in there? We know what happens to e-waste these days. We're one of the worst at it. There's also chances that drive's not in there at all. It was siphoned off and shoveled somewhere else. It's actually on a landfill in Ghana somewhere. This whole thing, as he said back in 2009, he got this lot for absolutely nothing. And if we take this man if we take him sincerely, I suppose, and not in someone who's a headline grabber, what this must be doing to his mental health is really quite worrying.
That's the real problem. And as you say, I mean, it's quite possible it never actually hit the landfill when it got tipped out in them. It's quite possible someone spotted it and picked it up and took it home and brushed it off and installed Doom on it. And so, as you say, Lee, there's no guarantee whatsoever that it's even there, let alone recoverable.
Yeah, and if he does buy the site, there's got to be thousands of drives in that site.
But there will be.
Can you spot the drive that you threw away 10 years ago?
There will be people, though, wealthy enough and crazy enough to stump up a large sum of money on the hope of, multiplying it by 4. If it's going to cost 50 million to buy the site and to trawl through it, and they want 300 million out of the claimed Bitcoin, maybe that's a gamble that some people will take. I don't know.
Okay. Well, Michael Diaz says he really needs to move on, and I think we should take that advice too. And so it's time for Nibs, and we're starting with you again, Lee.
Yeah, long-time listeners will recall a story from 2022 about melting power connectors of the latest NVIDIA GPUs. Now, I'm sorry to say there are reports of it happening again. As this is Nibs, here's the abridged version. The new 50 series GPUs use the same 12 VH power connectors as the 40 series NVIDIAs. The connection standard was created, developed or ratified, however you want to put it, by PCI SIG, which is the PCI standards group. And in 2022, they basically said that although they wrote the rules, it's up to the manufacturers how they design and manufacture the cables and the safety tolerances. There was a long, hard pause there as it glowered in at NVIDIA. But as before, the fault seems to be being caused when these 12 VH power connector are not fully pushed into place. This was the problem that we reported last time. And to combat this, PCI SIG have evolved the design of this cable into what's called the 12V-2x6. It's getting like USB cables. It's getting absolutely ridiculous. Basically, they've shortened the sensing pin by 1.5 millimeters and lengthened the 12 volt by quarter of a mil. Yeah, 0.25 mil. So the 50 series GPUs use this new cable, but the old cable can still be used. So obviously, if you've just upgraded your card and you've not upgraded your PSG, you'll have the old cable. So to cut a very dull story short, if you've got one of these new cards, you know, your machine has winged its way through the post, just take the side off, just make sure the cable is pushed into the GPU as hard as you can get it, make sure it clicks into place, because the commonality, once again, is if it's not quite in, the voltage can escape and the black smoke and the magic smoke will get out.
Can I just say that this 12 VHP WR connector, it's great compared to the old system where you'd have to have some number of 6 or 8 pin connectors multiply plugged into various slots on your card. But we are talking about 600 watts on what is basically a little plastic Lego brick. It does feel a little bit iffy to me. It's
interesting, AMD, who are also part of PCI SIG, have not adopted this. And they also put out a slide on, I think it was Twitter at the time, saying, you know, have yourself a safe Christmas. And they put up a picture of the old power connectors that they still use. So they've obviously noted that this perhaps is not the way to go.
Okay. And talking of ways not to go, ransomware writing is becoming less profitable, apparently, Darren.
No, well, yes and no. I mean, so the report is, this is from, believe it or not, there's an analyst that specializes in the blockchain. They call themselves Chainalysis, and I'm not going to repeat that name. They put out a report saying that as far as we know, I mean, obviously some people are struck by ransomware and they will just quietly pay the ransom and no one will ever know anything about it. But those that we know about, the value of ransomware payments during 2024 is down a lot on 2023. And the reason it is theorized is because, according to Jackie Burns-Coven from that analysis firm that I shan't rename, she says, and I quote, "Every major attack that we suffered last year, those groups no longer exist." It's basically a big success of law enforcement that many major ransomware operators have been shut down or forced to at least go underground. So that's good news, because obviously I did wonder whether it meant people were, I say it's good news, I did wonder whether people were getting the message that even if you are hit by ransomware, if you pay it, you're just encouraging them. But it seems that it's been a success of, would this be, well, I was going to say stick versus carrot, but no, it's not really that way around. One stick versus another stick.
And John, you've been having some fun in the BA lounges this week.
Well, yeah, some multiple fun for you this week. I was over in Copenhagen, and a wonderful city, highly recommend it. Fabulous food, great people, very calm, very, very tidy. Lovely place. I would go back in a heartbeat. Went to the British Airways lounge for my flight back. And what do you think that their lounge Wi-Fi password is?
Well, we all know.
I've been to Copenhagen, so I know that this substance it suffuses the culture.
It's just say it's kind of everywhere in in Copenhagen, and the password is Carlsberg, which is really rather charming, I thought. On a slightly more sort of fun but even more wacky niblet here. I'm going to post this URL over to our little chat for all of our live friends. But the URL, if you want to go and have a look, is linux.doompdf.dev/linux.pdf. Now, this is a PDF file, and it runs Linux inside it. Now, I didn't say that wrong. It is actually got a Linux kernel inside the PDF. Now, some months ago, some devs managed to get the PDF format JavaScript engine to support Tetris. Of course, everyone has to try and get Tetris. And of course, the next step up was they managed to get Doom to run within a PDF file. This has to be hosted within a Chrome browser, so it needs the framework of the Chrome browser to operate within. But now they've gone absolutely bonkers, and they've managed to get Linux, albeit a very cut down version of Linux. Let's not be overly generous here, but to actually get this thing to go and run inside a PDF, you just download the PDF, execute it, and it's executable code. It's using a RISC-V or RISC-V emulator based on TinyEMU, and you can click on the screen to enter commands on a sort of a virtual keyboard, and it works. And this is quite terrifying, really, that you can actually get this kind of executable code into something as innocuous as a PDF file. There's no practical use. It's slower than a very, very slow thing. But nevertheless, if it's a kind of it's our weekly reminder to be careful of files and are they executable, and it's not just because they're an exe file that's been renamed to something else. Reminder that if we go back to the 90s, I remember writing about putting malware into TIFF files because tag image file format allowed you to put arbitrary trees into the TIFF file. So what loaded up and looked like a nice picture could actually have a really nasty payload within it. You used to be able to do the same thing with NTFS file and streams, where you could actually copy malware onto the second stream of an NTFS file. So again, just always be careful what you're looking for, but this is a real good bit of fun. If you've got half an hour to let it boot, even on a decently fast machine, I suggest you go and try it out.
Good. I managed to pull my headphones out, so I didn't hear the last 30 seconds of that, but I'm sure it was brilliant. In the meantime, let's shuffle along to hot hardware, and it's with you again, John.
It is with me. Now, this is a kind of an update on something that I did a year or so ago, which, with entirely predictable outcome, got hated by everybody. So I'm coming back with the new version. The original version, I'll wave it here in front of the screen, was something called AirCard, and it was basically an Apple Apple platform tracking device in the shape of a credit card, and you can pop it in your wallet and then obviously track where it's gone or place it somewhere else. Now, downsides that we didn't like at the time, it was Apple only, and it did not have a replaceable battery. I mean, actually, to make this thing work, the battery's embedded in it. They did say when the battery runs out after about a year and a half or whatever, you could send it back to them and they would send you a new one at a minimal cost so they could strip it down for its parts. That was trying to keep Uncle Lee happy. And I must confess it's still working after all this time. Nice piece of tech. They have come out with a new version, and the new version is called get the name up here. It's called AirCard Pro, and this is basically the second generation. And this is different because it's rechargeable. They claim it will last 14 months, and you could just use any standard MagSafe Qi charger, sit it on it, and it will recharge, and you get the battery level in your phone. Now, there's two versions of this. One is the black one, which is for Apple. They also do a white version, which is for Android. So if you want this capability and you're an Android user, you can have it now. You can't use one on both. You basically have to decide which one you're buying for, probably because of the firmware that's blown into it and so forth. Otherwise, you get the full functionality on Android, locate my stuff, with one notable exception, and that's down to Android. If you leave something behind on the Apple platform, your phone can tell you left it behind. As I understand it, Android doesn't yet support that capability, but it's coming real soon now. Rolling Square, who make this, say it's not up to them. They can't implement it yet. They're waiting for Android to catch up. But that will be coming real soon now. This thing is very, very small. In fact, I can prove it to you because I have my gorgeous calibrated Mitutoyo calipers here, and I can just caliper it up, and I can tell you it is 2.02 millimeters thick. So it's the thickness of two credit, well, not even the thickness of two credit cards. So you can pop it into your wallet with no problems at all. It does do all the things you would expect, like you can make it ring, you can and so forth for location, and you get location on your phone as to where it is. It uses Bluetooth low energy. Now, word of warning. any type of tracker like this is really, really useful, but it also can be used for nefarious purposes. Like we were talking earlier about AI. This is small enough you could slip it into the lining of someone's coat. You could slip it in the back of someone's handbag. You could drop it under the seat of a car or whatever. There's a whole bunch of really bad things you could do with this. But there's also a whole bunch of really good things that you can do with this too, and I don't think we should blame this for the bad intent of other people. As part of their new Pro platform, they have come out with this, which they're calling the AirNot Pro, which is like an external dongly thing, which you can like put on a bag, and it's waterproof and does exactly the same functionality, except this uses a 2032 battery, which Lee probably approves of. Because it means you can just pop the cover off and change the battery within it, like you can on an AirTag anyway. Cost, they are £39.90 for one. There are discounts for either of the sizes and either of the platforms. There's a white version of this as well for Android, so they're cross-platform on both. £39.90. There are discounts if you buy multiples, and it comes down quite a bit if you buy 3 or 4 of them and then sort of dish them out to your family or give them to friends or whatever. Potster's asking what's the range of it. Well, it's Bluetooth Low Energy, so it needs to be within Bluetooth LE range, which is quite a few meters of a device that's on the Apple platform, and then it will locate through the network as the usual way.
So just to check on that, John, it can communicate. Presumably, the Apple-only version can communicate with any device on the Apple network. They don't have to
I believe so. Yes. That's the whole point. It just if it's near an Apple device, it will communicate over Bluetooth LE as a beacon and report back to Apple where it is.
Okay.
So yeah.
I use these. Android's the other way around. It can only communicate with Android phones.
Yeah, the Android version only talks to an Android phone. The Apple Pro version only talks to Apple phones. The Android ones are white. The Apple ones are black.
Okay, because the big disadvantage of something like Square's tiles previously was that they had to be within range of another Square user, didn't they? So
exactly, but this is not the case with these.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, I was over in Copenhagen, and it was really quite reassuring when I got to Heathrow T5 to be able to see that my baggage had come off the plane and was coming in towards the baggage area and hadn't been left in Copenhagen or had gone to Milan by mistake. Oh, yeah. On the subject of which, there is. Apple have announced that they're going to be opening up a capability to airlines for you to be able to report your baggage to an airline so they can help track it that way if it goes missing. But no, I really like these things. I like the credit card form factor. The V2 has got useful stuff over the V1, and I commend it to everybody.
Gentlemen, any questions before I innovate?
I mean, it sounds great as far as it goes. I find myself kind of thinking I'm stuck really to know what to think about it by my own ignorance of what the alternatives are. This isn't really something I've looked into, but just a quick Google reveals there's an awful lot of mostly kind of tile-like or more like an AirTag than a card. The card format seems to be unusual, but there's loads of them with different capabilities and different specs and different networks. Do you know anything about how this compares to what's out there, or is it more of a case of this is a solution that works well, so why
well, I've used the version 1 for a year in my wallet, and it just works. Yeah. It's not, and it's good for me to remind myself I left my wallet when I left work, for example, because being on the Apple platform, I would get that proactive warning that I've walked out the building and left my wallet behind. So that's useful. I use AirTags, the Apple ones, and I use them in this kind of dangly form factor, or drop them into a suitcase or whatever. So I mean, it kind of just works, which is a little bit boring really, because that's not very sexy, but it does just work. As I said, I can't speak for the Android implementation because I haven't tried that, but the Apple one in V1 worked fine, and the V2 one is now rechargeable, and so that's a good thing.
I'm going to buy one of these for Tim. He always leaves his wallet behind every time he comes to the pub, so it could be very useful.
I wouldn't complain about that.
I have a spare one here because I bought a 5-pack.
Very good. Okay, I'm opening the poll now for our friends on Discord, and I'm going to come to you first, Lee.
I bought some AirTags a while back. Having two kids, not to keep track of them, but to keep track of the school bags and various things and other bits and bobs. And I like that facility. I like to be able to sort of when they come home empty-handed, go right. Okay, where did you leave it? And I'd be lying if I said I haven't used it myself a couple of times. The downside with the AirTag is it is just a bit taggy, and this flat form is really appealing. As John said, you can slip it into various things and you really don't know it's there, which I think is really, and I'm not talking about for nefarious illegal situations, I think it is really the point. It should be pretty seamless to use. The rechargeable thing is really good. I would like to see a little more information from them about possibly what they do about getting the back at end of life. I'm sure they'll be very agreeable to that, because of course you can't replace the battery in them, but you can recharge it. So I have to say, all in all, and given the price, sorry, John, I missed the UK price.
£39.90 of your finest.
Okay, so they're a smidge more expensive than the
with a discount for quantity. So yeah,
fantastic with the AirTags. And I am slightly annoyed that when you go onto the sales page, it does say Android and Apple, and I thought, ooh, that's really on. Then I realised you've got to buy two different versions. That slightly wrong-footed me. But I have to say, just over the line, I think it is hot.
Darian.
Yeah, I actually did lose my wallet last year, and it was a bit eye-opening in the sense that I realised how little of the stuff in one's wallet these days you actually need to go about your daily life. It was the work of a couple of online form fills and one trip to the library, I think, to replace everything. That said, of course, one can't be too blasé about losing track of stuff. I do keep thinking I like the idea of a tracker for, let's say I had some actual cash in there for once, for instance. Yeah, I mean, this seems to do everything I would want. Like I said earlier, I don't know what the competition is like, but 40 quid is not going to break the bank. And it seems to do everything you'd want. I know there are some Android trackers out there that don't integrate with the Find My network. This one does, so that's a big plus point. I never expected it to work across Apple and Android. When that day comes, we'll have a big party, but until then, it's an irrelevant fantasy. I guess what I'm saying is I'm probably not going to buy it, but it is hot.
I agree. I think it's refreshing to see a company launch a V1 product and the criticisms that we make of it get addressed in V2. It's so rare that happens. I'm not saying they were directly listening to the Pro podcast by any means, but great to see a company evolve a product to remedy the flaws that we've identified. I think it's hot. I'd gladly go and buy one tomorrow to replace my AirTag, mainly because I took the AirTag to Vegas and now I can't find where I've left the bloody thing in the house. So yes, absolutely hot for me. John, I assume you're hot.
I'm a hot. Yeah, I met them at IFA in Berlin back in September. They had a stand there, and they seemed really switched on and knew what they were talking about and so forth. So yeah, they get my vote. They seem like a nice company to deal with.
Okay, and it's a hot with the Hyperloy 2. 81% in fact have voted hot on this one, so that's quite an emphatic victory. A clean sweep for the AirCard Pro. Is there a website you can go and order one of these, John?
Yeah. You just go to their website and fill in the bits and they'll get delivered to you.
Okay. Alrighty. So thank you very much for joining us this week. We'll be back again at 1 p.m. next Thursday. Until then, goodbye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Alrighty. Well, it seems that. Thank you, Barry, for sending this over.
Did it work?
Well, were there any glitches from me? Because you would know, I wouldn't.
I didn't hear any. You're a bit fuzzy on the video, but that could just be Riverside doing its thing. How long did the battery hold out?
Clearly, because I'm still here.
Well, yeah.
How much is left? Let me have a look. Okay, so we're down to 96% battery now.
Ooh, so that was tight. Yeah, that was very tight. Glad we made it through.
Might last until you get your Virgin sorted out.
Well, I actually got a very exciting letter saying that they would be commencing works on the 21st, which is only 8 days away. And since I'm not on next week,
that's what put the fibre in.
Yeah. I assume so. It doesn't actually say it's for that, but I don't know why else Virgin would be digging up the road. Maybe just to have a look.
Retarmac your drive.
Yeah.
I don't want to raise your hopes, but Virgin don't have the best of records when it comes to honouring dates. I think mine took about 3 months longer than they promised. But
Well, I mean, this isn't actually a letter from Virgin. This is a letter from a construction company working on behalf of Virgin, and it wasn't addressed to a person. I think it was just. I think they've gone to all the people on our little roads. So fingers crossed, this is the real deal. Anyway, like I said, I'm not on next week's, so next time you see me, don't be surprised if I'm in
Crystal
glorious
clear.
HD. Yeah, exactly.
wow. The future has arrived. In the meantime, I'm going to walk that dog that I just AI'd earlier. So I'll see you later.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Oh,
Thanks
thanks.
very
Bye-bye.
much.